After a few days on the road, the Israelites' food supplies are gone, and there is no way for them to replace those supplies. They confront Moses and Aaron, accusing them of bringing them into the desert to die. Moses and Aaron deny the accusations. They recall the great food they ate in Egypt, but they have forgotten the brutal conditions of slavery in which they were forced to live. Ironically, they would have preferred to have died in Egypt at the hands of the Lord, the very hand that brought about their liberation. The whole Israelite community set out from Elim and came to the desert of Sin, which is between Elim and Sinai, on the 15th day of the second month after they had come out of Egypt. In the desert, the whole community grumbled against Moses and Aaron. The Israelites said to them, "If only we had died by the Lord's hand in Egypt. There we sat around pots of meat and ate all the food we wanted. But you have brought us out into this desert to starve this entire assembly to death." Exodus chapter 16, verses 1 through 3. As it turned out, the people of Israel were quick to forget what God was capable of accomplishing. They began murmuring against Moses and Aaron in the second month after leaving Egypt, and this would become a recurring pattern for them. However, because these brothers were the Lord's chosen servants, Israel's dissatisfaction was ultimately directed at the Lord himself, not the brothers. When food supplies were running low, they remarked on how well they had it in Egypt. What a tragedy that they thought Egyptian slavery with a full stomach was preferable to God-supplied freedom with a little hunger along the way. Then the Lord said to Moses, "I will rain down bread from heaven for you. The people are to go out each day and gather enough for that day. In this way I will test them and see whether they will follow my instructions. On the sixth day they are to prepare what they bring in, and that is to be twice as much as they gather on the other days." Exodus chapter 16, verses 4 and 5. God was going to provide for them, but how they responded to God's provision would be a test in itself. He would send down bread from heaven, and they would only have to harvest enough to last them for a day's worth of food. They were supposed to gather enough food for 2 days on the sixth day. Now, these were rather straightforward instructions from God that the people were expected to follow. However, a rebellious heart will disregard even the most basic of instructions. So Moses and Aaron said to all the Israelites, "In the evening you will know that it was the Lord who brought you out of Egypt, and in the morning you will see the glory of the Lord, because he has heard your grumbling against him. Who are we that you should grumble against us?" Moses also said, "You will know that it was the Lord when he gives you meat to eat in the evening, and all the bread you want in the morning, because he has heard your grumbling against him. Who are we? You are not grumbling against us, but against the Lord." Then Moses told Aaron, "Say to the entire Israelite community, 'Come before the Lord, for he has heard your grumbling.'" While Aaron was speaking to the whole Israelite community, they looked toward the desert, and there was the glory of the Lord appearing in the cloud. The Lord said to Moses, "I have heard the grumbling of the Israelites. Tell them, 'At twilight you will eat meat, and in the morning you will be filled with bread. Then you will know that I am the Lord your God.'" Exodus chapter 13, verses 6 through 12. They emphasized to the people that Israel's complaints against them were in fact complaints against the Lord, not against Moses and Aaron. They were merely exercising God's authority in their leadership. The pair also explained to the Israelites that the Lord would provide them with bread in the morning and meat in the evening. Chapter 16, verse 8 and verse 12. Faced with such provision, the people would be certain that the God who had taken them out of Egypt was the one who had provided for them. That evening, quail came and covered the camp, and in the morning there was a layer of dew around the camp. When the dew was gone, thin flakes like frost on the ground appeared on the desert floor. When the Israelites saw it, they said to each other, "What is it?" For they did not know what it was. Moses said to them, "It is the bread the Lord has given you to eat. This is what the Lord has commanded. Everyone is to gather as much as they need. Take an omer for each person you have in your tent." The Israelites did as they were told. Some gathered much, some little. And when they measured it by the omer, the one who gathered much did not have too much, and the one who gathered little did not have too little. Everyone had gathered just as much as they needed. Then Moses said to them, "No one is to keep any of it until morning." However, some of them paid no attention to Moses. They kept part of it until morning, but it was full of maggots and began to smell. So Moses was angry with them. Exodus chapter 16, verses 13 through 20. After dark, the camp was blanketed with quail, and the next morning God caused his heavenly bread to emerge on the ground. According to God's instructions, Moses was to gather only enough for each day, 2 quarts each person, and not to store any of it. None of the food was to be kept overnight. Nevertheless, some of the Israelites attempted to hoard it. Moreover, leftovers spawned worms and stank the following morning. Each morning, everyone gathered as much as they needed, and when the sun grew hot, it melted away. On the 6th day, they gathered twice as much, 2 omers for each person, and the leaders of the community came and reported this to Moses. He said to them, "This is what the Lord commanded. Tomorrow is to be a day of Sabbath rest, a holy Sabbath to the Lord. So bake what you want to bake and boil what you want to boil. Save whatever is left and keep it until morning." So they saved it until morning as Moses commanded, and it did not stink or get maggots in it. "Eat it today," Moses said, "because today is a Sabbath to the Lord. You will not find any of it on the ground today. 6 days you are to gather it, but on the 7th day, the Sabbath, there will not be any." Nevertheless, some of the people went out on the 7th day to gather it, but they found none. Then the Lord said to Moses, "How long will you refuse to keep my commandments and my instructions? Bear in mind that the Lord has given you the Sabbath, and that is why on the 6th day he gives you bread for 2 days. Everyone is to stay where they are on the 7th day. No one is to go out." So the people rested on the 7th day. Exodus chapter 16, verses 21 through 30. On the 6th day, Moses explained why it was vital to gather enough food for 2 days' worth. In the book of Genesis, we are let in on the information that the 7th day was designated as a sacred Sabbath for the Lord, a hint of a commandment to follow. Exodus chapter 20, verses 8 through 11, KJV. "Remember the Sabbath day, to keep it holy. 6 days shalt thou labor and do all thy work, but the 7th day is the Sabbath of the Lord thy God. In it thou shalt not do any work, thou, nor thy son, nor thy daughter, thy manservant, nor thy maidservant, nor thy cattle, nor thy stranger that is within thy gates. For in 6 days the Lord made heaven and earth, the sea, and all that in them is, and rested the 7th day. Wherefore the Lord blessed the Sabbath day and hallowed it." The people were not to gather on that day, therefore they wouldn't find any in the field. However, just as some failed to heed the warning against excessive gathering, others failed to heed the warning against gathering on the Sabbath. When they went out to look for food, they were disappointed to find none. The Lord was enraged, and Moses was understandably enraged as well. God was teaching the Israelites through his instructions the idea that he provides for his people 1 day at a time, which they would later apply to themselves. Lamentations chapter 3, verses 22 and 23. "The steadfast love of the Lord never ceases. His mercies never come to an end. They are new every morning. Great is your faithfulness." Jesus articulates this kingdom provision in the Lord's Prayer, "Give us today our daily bread." But will we trust him to provide and receive it in the way he prescribes? The people of Israel called the bread manna. It was white like coriander seed and tasted like wafers made with honey. Moses said, "This is what the Lord has commanded. Take an omer of manna and keep it for the generations to come, so they can see the bread I gave you to eat in the wilderness when I brought you out of Egypt." So Moses said to Aaron, "Take a jar and put an omer of manna in it, then place it before the Lord to be kept for the generations to come." As the Lord commanded Moses, Aaron put the manna with the tablets of the covenant law so that it might be preserved. The Israelites ate manna 40 years, until they came to a land that was settled. They ate manna until they reached the border of Canaan. An omer is 1/10 of an ephah. Exodus chapter 16, verses 31 through 36. Since the Israelites had never seen the unusual substance before, they asked, "What is it?" which in Hebrew is the word manna. So that's what they called it. Moses instructed them to store 2 quarts of manna in a container so that future generations could see it. Eventually, it would be placed in the Ark of the Covenant. Hebrews chapter 9, verse 4, which had the golden altar of incense and the gold-covered Ark of the Covenant. This ark contained the gold jar of manna, Aaron's staff that had budded, and the stone tablets of the covenant. Israel would eat manna every day for 40 years until they reached the land of Canaan. Joshua chapter 5, verse 12, NIV. The manna stopped the day after they ate this food from the land. There was no longer any manna for the Israelites, but that year they ate the produce of Canaan.